Welcome to my office space here in my apartment complex. It feels weird to say that, but I'm excited to ultimately have this conversation. We're here today to talk about the Amazon crisis in our communities. Um, so yes, good morning, afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. My name is Mario Vasquez. I'm the communications coordinator at Teamsters Local 1932 in San Bernardino, California. I'm ecstatic to be here with you all today to help facilitate what I hope you'll find to be a very informative experience. You know why we're here. It's one of the first panels on the agenda today, and I hope you're all enthused to really dig deep and learn about what's going on when it comes to this giant corporation, Amazon. Half of all online shoppers begin their online shopping at Amazon, and the company is projected to soon be the largest private employer in the United States, with thousands of Amazon delivery stations reportedly being built just about everywhere in the coming years. So, really, how is this working out for all of us? Workers are being broken down by Amazon's grueling work pace. We're talking about eye-popping injury rates nearly 3 times higher than the general warehousing industry. Communities are seeing whole swaths of workers just churn through this machine, with localities seeing huge, notable spikes in turnover rates whenever Amazon does come to town. Workers everywhere, unionized and non union, across industries, are dealing with the disruption caused by Amazon capitalism, seeing standards derailed by the company's influence and large scale ambitions. I think there's no denying that. Meanwhile, the air quality around communities and workers gets worse, with Amazon somehow promising to fix it all very soon. Given all of that, this past June, delegates elected by members from all 500 Teamster local unions convened virtually for the union's 30th International Convention. At these conventions, we set the stage for the direction of our union and nominate officers who serve for the next several years. Unions are one of the few large civic organizations left where everyday working people get to practice democracy. And given the challenges that we face as a society and a world in 2021, this practice has never been so important. At the convention, delegates overwhelmingly approved a resolution mobilizing our union's membership and its resources to help build worker and community power necessary to beat back the existential threat to working families currently posed by Amazon. This is now the mission of our 1 million plus members across the country. Today, the Teamsters Union is proud to host this panel, this workshop here, with some of the labor, environmental, and social justice leaders who are helping build that power in both their own and collective ways. So I'd like to take some time to introduce each panelist, and we'll dive into some questions. If you have some questions, I hope you can put them in the chat below. I hope we'll have time to get to as many of them if possible. Today, we have Benjamin Reynoso. He is a city council member at the city of San Bernardino. He's here representing himself, not the city of San Bernardino. I want to be clear about that. We also have Andrea Vidarre with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice, as well as Arlene Martinez from Good Jobs First. We should have Donnell Jefferson from Teamsters Local 667 and a worker at UPS, although there is some trouble, so hopefully he should be joining soon before the end of the panel. So to start us off, I hope we can begin with Ben. I do have some questions for you. Ben, sure. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I've worked alongside you quite a bit in the past couple of years, and I'm hoping to sort of like get that story a little bit out there, because I think we saw a lot, and it's such an interesting story that a lot of people don't know about. But Ben, you grew up in San Bernardino, California. which is ultimately America's shopping cart. This is the warehouse capital of the country, pretty much. And the rise of the logistics industry truly was a backdrop to significant portions of your life. In 2019, you and community allies took on Amazon locally. The group, San Bernardino Airport Communities, first knocked on thousands of doors, rallied hundreds to a town hall, mobilized just as many to an FAA hearing a few months later, and brought out nearly the same amount all day at a very busy community picket line on Cyber Monday. Later on, you led a delegation packing an office for Amazon's developer with drums, banners, and megaphones. It was quite the scene. I want to ask you, that's a lot of people power. So why all the activity in San Bernardino as of late when it comes to Amazon?
Well, as you stated it so eloquently, I grew up here, and I wouldn't be here as an elected official if I hadn't had the community support that have been garnered for years. But it wasn't just about me. I'm just a little piece of a long train of community effort and support. But to be honest with you, I was thinking about this as we were coming into this panel, and it's something that always comes back to me, and it's the basic pop education. It's getting down to the basics of educating people. And that's why the campaign, as Mario stated, was so powerful. Because when we went door to door canvassing, people were notified. They weren't being asked to do anything special. They were literally just being informed, hey, you know somebody who works at Amazon probably, but we weren't even assuming that or leading with that because we already knew. We would ask them, hey, did you know that this airport expansion coming down to San Bernardino Airport is going to be an Amazon air cargo logistics center? Have you heard about it? Our city's not being forthright about it. The developers of the airport aren't being forthright about it. And so growing up here, I got to see the boom. I grew up as a community organizer since I was 14 years old here in the city of San Bernardino. And me and my friends, we knew after years and years, to be honest with you, a very discouraging feedback from elected officials, from just leaders, not community leaders, because we were becoming the community leaders that we wanted to see. But when you're young, the narrative looks like, I want to get the heck out of San Bernardino. I need to go where opportunities are, plentiful, where I can get paid a living wage. People knew at the same time that Amazon arrived that they weren't paying anything, that it was going to be backbreaking work. And I still have friends to this day that are mentally scarred, some physically scarred, unfortunately, by the effects of the warehouse boom, as we like to call it. And to be honest with you, it weighs heavy on my heart. And as a sitting elected official now, it's something that I have to challenge as much as humanly possible because of what we heard in the beginning of that campaign. What is so unique about this campaign in San Bernardino, how it started, was that for the first time, I grew up as a community organizer in the social justice realm in general. We cared about a multitude of issues, but I wouldn't say that we were as knowledgeable as a labor union on labor rights, on wage theft, on things like that. And I also wouldn't say that we're experts on environmental justice. We're experts on people, on what people need to basically know in order to be able to stand on anything. And so where we started with that campaign was first, Mario and Andrea here, we unified labor, environmental justice, social justice, all in one room. And once we agreed on baseline, we're fighting for the same thing, all of us, good jobs, clean air. People are going to gravitate towards this because this is what they've always wanted. This is what my peers couldn't put the words together to say, was that we need a voice that translates. We need something that actually gets things done. And so, yeah, Mario, we did. We packed out a church that I used to attend, Our Lady of Hope here in San Bernardino, full of people who lived right in the vicinity of what would be the new logistics center. Call it what you will, Amazon. Call it what you will, public and elected officials. But we're going to call it what it is. It's you telling us that we're not good enough for more, that we are destined to be America's shopping cart. And so we did do creative things to keep people energized, like go to the developers' offices in Ontario, where they think that they're safe, I guess. And we wanted to remind them with lots of drums and energy that we're here and we're not going anywhere. And so now I'm an elected official, but I rely on the intelligence of people like Mario Vasquez, of Andrea Vidare, plenty of other community residents who we had been engaging for so long to keep me informed, to keep me accountable to the exact things that brought us here. I am everyone on this call. I mean, I know I'm speaking to an audience that isn't from San Bernardino, but every time I speak to my community, I feel a part of it. And that's because of the work and the acknowledgement that we have baseline needs that we need to meet. I don't know if that kind of captured kind of the baseline of what the question was asking, but this is just a long time coming, and we're only beginning. And I want to emphasize this one last point before we transition, is that what I started with on just basic education is that people don't exactly know what their rights are. People don't know what they are entitled to. And in a place like San Bernardino, you start to ignore what your basic human rights are. And it's a sad case. But now we're energizing the community continually, keeping them engaged. You have to be willing to not be dedicated to so much tangible. And you have to believe that everything that you do, as we call it in organizing, every touch, every time you have a conversation with somebody, that transcends any kind of tangibles. When the tangibles come, what are people going to do? Are they going to stop working? No. They're going to keep engaging people for the next big win, for the next small victory, for the next moment that they feel like I mattered, my community's engaged, my neighbors are now more connected than we've ever been. And it's about basic needs that we've always wanted.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It really is hard to overstate how tied the warehouse boom and Amazon's rise in San Bernardino have been. Amazon's first warehouse in San Bernardino, first warehouse in California was in San Bernardino, just south of the airport. Ben, can you maybe describe what was the vision instead for this collective vision instead for places like Amazon's airport facility at the airport, or Amazon's facility at the airport, and in other places throughout the warehousing industry in the city?
Yeah, so this whole campaign was anchored around a community benefits agreement. We needed a CBA. We needed guarantees, because plenty of people can sell you a whole yarn of BS. But until you have tangible, legally enforceable guarantees, living wages, the opportunity to be able to breathe clean air, that looks like, in a place like San Bernardino, you hear a lot of older elected officials that I sit alongside still claim that, hey, the air has gotten way better, we can go outside now. But if people don't know that the warehouse that I work at isn't going to cost me an 18-wheeler riding down my street, pumping diesel fumes. It's nothing against the trucker. It's the irresponsibility of it. We want responsible development. And a community benefits agreement would ensure baseline things that people need: living wages, and the right to, honestly, collectively bargain. It was beyond time for that. I'm really grateful that this campaign, I feel like I'll be negligent in saying that there's no coincidence that this campaign spurred and became a model for how to engage people on Amazon and how to advocate for legally enforceable actions. Give us more money. We have baseline guarantees. I know as a council member now, baseline guarantees on tax revenues. And we actually had to go up to Sacramento to defend it, because there's disparities between those who host the delivery trucks versus those who host the thousands of employees in fulfillment centers that are honestly breaking people's backs, that are having people just getting fired and hired and fired and hired. We become a revolving door. And so we've been working to try to make sure that the revolving door isn't just a revolving door anymore. It should be a door that once you step through it, you're guaranteed your wages, you're guaranteed your benefits, and you're guaranteed the right to be able to say how the employment conditions in general are. Because us as organizers, I've got friends, I personally have never worked inside of Amazon, but everyone knows someone here who's either worked in there, has worked there themselves, and they've got tons of ideas. The ridiculous quotas. We have state legislation that now allows for transparency around that. And that's been a long time coming. But people don't even know what their protections are. Amazon has allowed for employees to be siloed, and intentionally, I believe, to silo them so that there is no kind of collective effort that can come out of any kind of advocacy or that can maintain any kind of advocacy. And the community benefits agreement, it was loose and tight in regards to what we needed, in regards to what minority businesses being allowed to be there, because we were talking about the airport. We're talking about expansion at our actual airport. We don't have commercial flights that fly out of there. We have some Luxair flights that go here and there, but we didn't have anything at the airport. So we want someone. We can talk about Amazon as this big, lofty beast as though the man himself doesn't have the ability to impact our communities in the most beneficial way ever by injecting funds where they need to go, by injecting in housing. If you're going to live in our community, you can't just employ people at $15 an hour, rip their stock option as a compromise for yourself, and expect for us to just accept that. We want more out of you. You're now, whether we like it or not, when we're up there advocating for our revenue tax, Amazon's a part of our community. As much as we dislike them, they're not going to disappear. And so it was about making sure that a community player of that magnitude invests the financial resources in the community to make sure that the prettiest thing around the community isn't just the box. It's the actual neighborhoods. It's the infrastructure. It's the dedicated funds to paving the roads that allow for thousands of your trucks to come and make this happen. We're also the consumers here. There was plenty of angles to approach this, and it was disheartening to watch them still maneuver and approve this without us. But it's in the courts for a reason, because they lie, because they don't tell the truth about what the real impact will be socially, physically, environmentally. We breathe that air. Childhood asthma rates are off the charts here. That's not a normal that we're ever going to accept. And so what do we do about it is we continue to fight. We continue to bring models of where community benefits agreement has been successful in LA and other areas. My sister got Windows years after. It's dedicated research that we wanted in the CBA that would keep them accountable. If you have to analyze your impacts every year, do you think you'll be able to ignore it? No. But what will we do? We'll continue to fight, Mario. We'll continue to fight, Andrea. It's in us. What we have in a community like this, beyond a CBA and beyond the effort to push, is an undying thirst for equality. And I'm sad to say that, but just like the civil rights movement, what did it focus around? Housing, labor rights. And that's the beginning. We aren't where we need to be, and so we're going to fight until we get there. And using us, like you said, Mario, the first Amazon was here in San Bernardino, and I'd be surprised if they ever were to leave San Bernardino. So why not take advantage of that? Why not leverage everything that we have, the thousands of people and their voices? Why not? That's why. Because why not?
Thank you, Ben. And ultimately, yes, that airport facility that was a subject of all of this community concern is now the subject of litigation by the California State Attorney General's office, as well as our union and others. We hope to see justice in that regard very soon. So thank you, Ben. I'll be moving on to Andrea now, Andrea Vidaure from the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. Andrea, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I wanted to start off by just briefly describing PC4EJ, or I know it as PSEDGE. The People's Collective for Environmental Justice was founded on the mission of advancing collective resistance in the fight against pollution, exploitation, and existential threats to life across San Bernardino, the rest of the Inland Empire region, and really the country's working people and the globe, I'd say, right? So your organization's work has been featured recently in the New York Times and the Guardian as these issues relate to Amazon specifically. Andrea, what should the broader public know as someone who has been on the front lines fighting against these developments and the evils they pose for our communities, what are the types of communities that Amazon is likely to build its warehousing operations in?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this, and I'm excited that Ben really laid out what's happening in San Bernardino currently and what that's also happening in the surrounding cities of San Bernardino. But what I wanted to come and say is that this is not just happening in the Inland Empire and San Bernardino. This is actually part of Amazon's business model, right? To come into communities where redlining and environmental racism are clear as day, where you can go in and obviously see the products when corporations and government systematically under-resource communities, when we can see that poverty has taken over because of the decisions of corporations and governments. And we know this because we can see it throughout Amazon's footprint in the United States and across the world. There was an analysis done on Amazon's locations of its warehouses throughout the country, and it showed that disproportionately the majority of their locations are in communities and zip codes where the majority of that population are people of color. And if we all know the history and the existing state of the politics of this country, and we know that when there are communities where there are majority people of color and low-income communities, there's over-policing, there is under-resourcement, there is poverty, there is pollution. And all of these things make it a perfect target for Amazon to come in and continue to extract from and really continue to exacerbate those legacies of racism that exist there. A lot of these communities that Amazon comes into are already being overburdened by pollution, are already experiencing the highest levels of ozone pollution like we are here in San Bernardino and Riverside County, or the highest levels of PM 2.5, as we'll see in the Central Valley, in Chicagoland, in Newark, New Jersey, in LA, and these other places where Amazon is very big in. We'll see that there is higher levels of pollution there. And what that also translates to is higher levels of asthma, higher levels of cancer, higher levels of other respiratory issues that we see. These communities have been fighting. I will say, though, Amazon comes into communities where there's already some type of disadvantage. But that's not to say that these communities also aren't the ones that have led the way for union movements, have led the way with giant environmental justice wins, et cetera. So I'll say that it's two-faced, that Amazon also comes into communities where there is a lot of resistance. And so that's the perfect place for us to fight.
Thank you, Andrea. I have to say that a lot of people immediately point to the fact that Amazon has a climate pledge and that they're pretty proud about that. They founded this pledge in 2019. It's a commitment to achieve net zero carbon emissions across their businesses by 2040. Can you highlight how this is problematic for our broader society and the planet in general? Are the company's climate policies the fix for the very problems it's helping create, or is there a different way?
Yeah, no, and I'll start off by saying a lot of people don't make the connections, but Amazon is a fossil fuel company. And how would you feel, or how do you feel when you hear Shell, Chevron, BP telling us that they're going to fix climate change? The very people that are profiting every single day from it, the very people that have spent loads of money investing in climate denialism or investing in elected officials that don't believe in climate change. When we think of a fossil fuel company doing that, we need to think of Amazon in the same type of way, especially when they're putting in so much effort into their climate pledge. Because although Amazon may not be extracting oil and gas, although they do give their services to oil and gas companies to automate and make extraction of oil and gas faster, Amazon does burn fossil fuels every single day. That's part of their entire model, whether it's their trucks, whether it's their planes, whether it's them growing in the railroad space. They are using fossil fuels to run all of their operations. And we are going to continue getting stuck onto a future of fossil fuels if we have companies that profit off of fossil fuels kind of leading the way in trying to curb the pollution. A couple of other things I want to say about the climate pledge that I think is really important is that the climate pledge wants to go net zero, and that's already where the first harm is done. We just talked about how our communities that shop the least from Amazon but have most of Amazon's burden in them, they, are the ones footing the bill. They are not the ones that are going to get to benefit from this climate pledge. Amazon has already put its efforts into delivery vans, and they're going to electrify delivery vans, and they're going to go towards that. But there is no conversation about what they're doing on the medium duty, heavy duty airplanes, rail cycle, right? They're really focusing on what the consumer sees and what, again, like the highest consumers are going to be benefiting from. But the people, again, that are living closest to the warehouses, closest to the pollution, are seeing the least of that benefit of the climate pledge. They're also going to be relying on offsets. And we know that's already entirely racist in nature, right? Let's just ignore everything that's happening in these communities and let's focus on something somewhere else. And then the other thing I'll just end with is that it's really problematic when we have a corporation like Amazon saying that they are going to help stop climate change, because then it really tells our government that they are setting the standard on what them reducing emissions is going to look like, instead of the government being able to come in and say, no, we're in a climate emergency, we're going to need you to meet these certain deadlines or these certain standards. And instead they're imposing their standards and their deadlines onto us. And we know if we continue to allow that to happen, we're going to see the same pattern that we saw in the oil companies, just delaying any type of emissions reductions, delaying any type of progress on this.
Thank you, Andrea. Very crucial information that I think doesn't exactly reach most people amid the company's PR campaigns and the commercials. I think, during the pandemic, it was every commercial break that I was seeing some sort of like commercial touting this pledge. So crucial information. I really appreciate you being able to share this with everybody in the audience. Now I'll be moving on to Arlene Martinez from Good Jobs First. Welcome, Arlene. Good Jobs First is renowned for its tracking of Amazon's engagement with local governments and the very lucrative concessions that Amazon has been able to secure from local governments while attempting to develop its warehouses. Arlene, what should the broader public understand about Amazon's extensive use of public subsidies, direct, indirect, over the years? How exactly are we footing the bill?
Yeah, hi Mario. Thanks for having me, and thanks for this great panel. It's a great group to be a part of. So tax avoidance has always been part of Amazon's strategy, and it started from where it decided to open operation, which was in Washington. There's no personal income tax in Washington, and it's got the most regressive taxing system in the country. ITEP, which is the Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy, has documented that. So the poor are already paying a lot more there in taxes. So Jeff Bezos looked at Washington. He said, there's no personal income tax. It's great for corporations. Let me start there. And what he did, first of all, was look for places where he could avoid sales tax. You'll remember that Amazon at that time, a lot of online sales weren't taxed for sales tax. So not only did he open in Washington, but he opened his first distribution centers in states where there was no sales tax. So he opened in Delaware, New Hampshire. And then around 2011 is when Prime started. So he had to get a lot of distribution facilities open all across the country. So then that's when he turned his attention toward subsidies, right? So he comes in, demands that the city gives him millions of dollars in property tax breaks, sales tax breaks, all kinds of land, cheap land. And so then they started in March 2012 is when they really started an office. Amazon created an office just dedicated to getting subsidies. So over the years, our researcher, she's in the chat there, Kasia Charchinska, has been documenting how much Amazon has gotten, and what she's found is 4.1 billion. And we know that's a big understatement, because we can't track every single deal that Amazon's getting free money on, and we really rely on press reports for that. So and in Amazon's own internal documents, they say, well, he says we want to get about $1 billion a year from these in incentives. That's their goal, which is pretty ambitious. So I'm glad to see a lot of talk about community benefits agreements in here, because from where we stand, and just one more figure about this year, because so far Amazon has gotten $650 million in subsidies this year alone. So that's less than 10 months or so. $650 million, while Amazon is experiencing these absolutely record profits, right? Bezos has become the richest man in the world, and we're still turning over, in one case, $150 million in upstate New York for a single deal. You'll remember that deal. Amazon said, well, we'll give you the $150 million, the town told them, but you have to use local labor, right? So like 80% had to be local labor. Amazon said, I can't find any local labor, so they waived that requirement. So I'll just end it on this, Mario, before I keep going on and on. But the basic thing is, Amazon should not get a single more dollar in subsidies, not a single penny more. And Amazon is the one that should be paying communities to be here, because of, you just heard half an hour's worth of all the destruction that Amazon brings, how it touches every kind of industry. It touches wages, the environment, small business degradation. I mean, you could go on and on about the impact of Amazon. And we've really got to deal with the broader systemic problems, right, that allowed an Amazon to be created in the first place. Because if we dismantle Amazon, which we can do, there's going to be another one, because of the way that the rules are rigged, right, to favor corporations. So that's why this is such a great collaborative effort, because it touches so many different areas. We're just sort of the one part of it, but I'm just so glad to hear, all these fights, and seeing San Diego looking at potentially tying a living wage ordinance. In Memphis yesterday, there was a council member who introduced tying wages to the incentive. So if you get an incentive and you can't pay less than $22 an hour, they said, well, that, we can't regulate wages. But you can decide if you want to give a company money, and if they want that free money and they want it, they can't have it string free. So they can't have it both ways. So I'll just end there for now.
Great. Yeah, it really is important to underline that, like, this company ultimately grew by leaps and bounds during the pandemic, right? Ultimately, folks who did lose their jobs because of everything going on found themselves soon at an Amazon warehouse, because they were indeed hiring, right? And employment at the company grew, just as demand from consumers grew, right? This company did pretty well during the pandemic, right? And ultimately, given all of that, it is obscene that all of this subsidy work is going on behind the scenes on their behalf, right? Arlene, can you maybe, for the uninitiated, maybe talk a little bit about different ways that folks can use the tools available by Good Jobs First to learn more about this as it relates to Amazon and just subsidies in general?
Yeah, so at Good Jobs First, we have something called the Amazon Tracker, which lists every deal, so you can see how much money that Amazon's getting. What we also have there is a map that shows where Amazon puts its distribution facilities. They have to be near their affluent customers, their affluent prime customers, and that's where they need to open up their facilities. So they go to those areas. They don't need tax breaks, because they have to open there. If they're going to get you your delivery in a few hours or a day, they have to be in that site. So that's just another reason why they should not be getting these subsidies, because it's core to their business model. We also have something I just want to flag called Violation Tracker, because we've been talking a lot today about labor violations, wage violations. Amazon is a pretty big offender, right? So in Violation Tracker, we list all the violations that Amazon's had, 171 million. Almost half of those are wage theft. So, these are things that people that are working on this issue can bring to their policymakers, because so many of these deals are done at the local city council level. They're done at the county level. So those are the ones that $150 million deal I talked about in upstate New York really was a county deal that gave away the money. So I encourage people to come to really take action. These are local fights that are happening. And there's a lot of information about the types of subsidies that Amazon can get. You really got to read the fine print, right? Because these agreements should have, if they do give away subsidies, community should get something in return. We don't think they should get any subsidies at all. But if they do, then there better be a really strong community benefits agreement, like Ben was talking about, that secures local hires, right? Prevailing wage, and environmental remediation. All types of things should be included in these community benefits agreements. And we also have information about those on our site too. So a lot of information, information can be such a powerful tool in these fights. And they just don't create the types of jobs. That whole narrative about subsidies creating jobs is just false. I think you're muted, Mario.
Dang it. I thought I was going to get through the whole thing without doing that once. And there we go. So thank you, Arlene. I'll take it over for now. I appreciate those insights. I know the audience sure does, given the chat and how lit it is right now. So thank you. Sorry to say that we were expecting Donnell Jefferson from Teamsters Local 667, who is a member leading strong efforts in Memphis to progress his local's involvement and the members in that local's involvement in the broader Amazon project. And unfortunately, he couldn't be here today due to technical difficulties. I will just take this time just to speak briefly on my experience. I myself am my grandparents were farm workers here in San Bernardino County as well as in Imperial County, and they worked they worked their whole life to try and obviously get ahead in some ways for their family, right? And my own father, he worked in the logistics industry for quite some time as an independent contractor before getting a job at UPS. And UPS is a unionized employer, one of the largest unionized companies in the world, and ultimately, the night and day difference there, the union difference for my father was really apparent growing up. We did have some hard times where public assistance was necessary, and getting into UPS, luckily, was a big opportunity for him, and ultimately was the source. This good union job was a source of a lot for me and my family, and ultimately it was able to get me to a place where, fortunately, I can sort of count on a comfortable life because of my father's progression and ultimately long family sustaining career at UPS, thanks in large part to this union contract and the member power that created that union contract. So ultimately, as far as people like him and people like Donnell Jefferson, who I wish you could have met, ultimately, the industries across the country that Amazon and the world that Amazon is affecting will see degradation of their standards over time because of Amazon's reach and ambitions. It's happening now, and standards in the industry are already being affected. Ultimately, what I'm so proud of and I'm so inspired to see is members all across this country of the Teamsters Union coming together with communities, neighbors, people around them as neighbors, as fellow people in the community, to say that we can do something different. And as you heard from Ben, in San Bernardino, it looked like Teamsters coming together with folks in the environmental justice movement, in the broader labor movement, in the social justice movement. In places like San Diego, it's looked like coming together with neighbors to stop Amazon developments from bringing all of the evils described to their neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. It's since this past June when the International did pass this resolution, and even before then, because it takes quite some time to put plans together, right? Um, Teamsters are mobilized and ready to organize, ultimately do their part in building the solidarity that it'll take to build worker and community power across this country, the types of power that we'll need to take on the biggest company in the world and win, right? So with that, I'll bring it back to our panel. Ultimately, I thank you all for answering my just a few of my questions right. I would like to just bring us all on and answer one last question here. It's very apparent from your diverse backgrounds and experiences that Amazon is disrupting communities through so many dimensions, right? Um, with all of this in mind, could any of you offer the audience some wisdom on what solidarity means with Amazon in mind?
I can take a first crack at it. Yeah, so being in the environmental justice space, we hear a lot about how labor and the environment just don't go together, right? They're always trying to pit us against each other. It's always we're trying to take their jobs away, or they don't care about our life, right? And I don't think either of those are true. I don't think people in the labor movement don't care about frontline communities' lives, and I don't think that we want to take people's jobs, right? I think that's the narrative that's imposed on us, and if anything, it sounds like the larger rhetoric we hear in this country, right, when associated with immigrants or associated with those types of things. So that's to say that I think solidarity with Amazon is really just moving past that narrative and really working towards justice for all of our communities, and not looking for the immediate, not the immediate benefit, but really the long-term benefit of us growing community and worker power. Very early on into this movement, I got this like cemented in my brain that like workers are part of our community and communities are workers. Like we cannot keep separating the two as if workers don't live in the same community that they're a part of. And so that separation of labor between the environmental movement, I think is one of the big things we're going to have to keep pushing for in being able to fight a company like Amazon, right? And being take back, right, our communities. So I think that's what solidarity looks like. And that goes out to all parts of the labor movement, right? And that goes out to all parts of the environmental movement as well. So thank you.
Okay. Well put, Andrea. And thank you for the question. And I appreciate you mentioning narrative, because I think solidarity at its core here in a fight like this against a behemoth is to be able to reach across the table, not to the people who are trying to monopolize you, but like Andrea stated, we are not siloed. The worker is your neighbor. It doesn't matter what the wage is for somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily work in an Amazon. That person at one time or another understood what it was like to have to grind it out. And you have to understand what translating that narrative is to the most opposing force. Some people think, and I know when this campaign started, we had our own hiccups, we'll be honest. But what we came out of through those kind of trials and tribulations and breaking down and being honest, you have to be honest with each other, is that, I hear the echoes of my father's voice as a kid. Instant gratification does not exist. And if it does, something is coming to you that is not going to be very gratifying. And so in a fight like this, solidarity is understanding the long term. Like I said earlier, is the basic educational kind of points. You have to be able to be patient and translate the things that you know that the average person may not know. And you have to have the patience to understand that people come from different walks of life. Cities like San Bernardino, I spent a lot of time in the state of Mississippi. I have family down there. I lived there for 6 years, 18 to 24. California is a unique place, but San Bernardino is even more unique in that it encompasses all of America. People live right next door to each other, have totally opposing views, but we still got them out to a town hall. And how do you think we did that? Was meeting them where they're at. Solidarity looks like putting your pride to the side. Labor, environment, social justice, what you think that you need people to know. You've got to put that to the side. You have to listen. You have to be able to truly, authentically listen to people and don't manipulate them. Don't lie to them. Be honest, be forthright, and be very transparent about what this fight looks like. That any kind of investment that you get from anyone is more than enough. What we do want serious investment from, like we said, and it'll come, is the bigger players, is the people that you see on the opposite side of the table that aren't trying to come across, the Amazon. But you have to be able to listen to people, to understand intersectionality amongst movements, and you have to be able to unite them. Because like any time in history where anything has been tangibly granted or gained, it's because people actually did this successfully. The moment that you start to, even when you have those little wins like I mentioned, we easily could have gone like this, right? Could have started going boom, boom, boom. And it could feel like this, right? Like just a little touch. Maybe 2 organizations out of 10 who are still united because they started together on the same premise. You have to be able to listen to your partners, the community, and you have to be able to bring that to the forefront and always lead with that. Put your pride to the side. I know I don't know exactly all the walks of life that I'm speaking to right now, but I know we all have a little bit of ego in us. We all have a little bit of pride. We're all studied and educated. We all got degrees and things like that. But you got to put that to the side. You don't know what that person has been living, and you never may. And so you have to understand that I'm going to begin where your story begins. And lead with that. Be authentic. That's what solidarity looks like in this fight to me.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Andrea. I was a reporter at the Morning Call in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 2011 when the first big story that I saw on Amazon broke that really went into the conditions of what workers face in the warehouses. It was when Amazon put ambulances outside of its warehouses during extreme heat days because workers were passing out. So rather than just put air conditioning into a warehouse, they preferred to spend their money on ambulances because it was cheaper. That's kind of like for me that was a big moment. Amazon was young back then, but that story always stuck in my mind because that's the sort of the history of Amazon. And when I look at Bezos jumping off on being a spaceman, I think about how it was done on the backs of workers who a lot of them are just trying to provide for their family. They're trying to go to school, whatever the reason is that brings them to just get a job in a community where there may not be one. And Amazon is so, we've spent this whole time talking about it, so I won't belabor it, but I just will mention that all the different parts that Amazon touches, from the environment, labor, small businesses, even the vendors, it steals supply chain information from vendors so that it can replicate the products and then offer them cheaper. And it competes head to head with anyone it sees as a competitor. I mean, it is ruthless. I think we have to be ruthless in fighting it too. And there's a lot of intersections with the work that we're doing. And it's also an economic development. So what does good economic development look like? It's not subsidies. It's not giving our tax dollars that we work really hard to create to the richest company in the world. You know, good economic development is community driven from the ground up. And it has to do with making sure that there's childcare so that women can go to work. It has to make sure that communities are made for all ages so that seniors are able to get around. People who may have physical disabilities can enjoy communities. So that's what true economic development looks like. And there's a lot of intersection with tax policy. You know, like I said earlier, if Amazon were to go away, the next corporation would sprout up because of the way that our tax policy is set up and the way that all these loopholes that helped Amazon become so huge would still be in place for if Amazon were to close tomorrow. So when I think about Amazon and solidarity, I think about all these different areas that we have to make movement on and make progress on. And yes, like someone said on the chat, to celebrate those victories, because there are a lot of victories, and you're seeing the Teamsters that are leading a lot of them, getting these communities to reject Amazon, to not to vote down these tax breaks. Those are all wins, and they're so unheard of. You know, they get these big press attentions. Let's make them common. You know, let's make them as common as those rewrites of press releases saying Amazon got that subsidy. So I'm so glad to have been part of this conversation, to hear the great work from just a few of the colleagues that are in this space. It's such a big community, and we have so much work to do, but we're making progress, and we can get there.
Absolutely. Yes. Build a better world, win the future, come together with your neighbors. It's coming to a place near you if it hasn't already. So reach out, see what's going on in your community. Before we hop off, though, and we might be a few minutes early, but can we go around just really quickly if people want to reach out to you or specifically, or your organization, what would be a good place to reach you all? And we'll see if folks can pop in questions in the chat. Maybe we have a few minutes for that. So if you're in the audience, put questions in the chat while we go around and say how we can contact these wonderful folks. Ben, maybe can you lead us off?
Sure. The best way to reach me is by email, to be honest with you, at votereynoso, as my last name is spelled, vote verbatim, votereynoso@gmail.com. And my social media handles, I'm very responsive. I'm a young council member. I'm only 29 years old, so I'm very in touch, and I know that this is a strength. And I do most of my communication, to be honest with you, on social media. It's Vote Reynoso everywhere. Vote Reynoso, Facebook, Instagram. Instagram and Twitter are probably the best. I try to stay away from Facebook as it has grown a little toxic. But Vote Reynoso, any and everywhere, and Vote Reynoso at gmail.com. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love networking, and anything that I can offer to any of you, I would love to learn from you as well. So please don't hesitate. Vote Reynoso everywhere. Vote Reynoso.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I'll go. You can follow our collective's page on Twitter, or we have a website as well where you can get in touch. There's an email option, or you can, of course, DM us. On Twitter, we're PC4EJ. So what's on my name with the 4 instead. So PC4EJ, and then PC4EJ.org.
We're at goodjobsfirst.org. All our contact information is on there. We're extremely responsive on email and social media. Our Twitter's at Good Jobs First, Facebook's Good Jobs First, and LinkedIn is Good Jobs First. So, yeah, pretty easy to get to, and we're extremely responsive.
Great. Thank you all so much. Going through the chat now, looks like we really only had one question. Lots of shout outs for CBAs and interest in that tool. Lots of plaudits for Andrea Andrea talking about workers and community. Ben, solidarity is putting your pride aside. And a few general shout outs on how we need to celebrate our wins and spread all this good information. Really, the only question seemed to have been for, I guess anybody could take this, but this was as someone in the business world doing electric vehicles and solar work, how would you prefer companies trying to cut emissions at warehouses work with local partners and campaigns? I'm assuming that's for Andrea, but anybody probably can take that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one thing from the airport fight that we maybe sometimes are missing from the business side is like the technical analysis of what these companies can do. So we know that these companies are not going to do what's going to cut their bottom line, but they make it seem like it's absolutely impossible, that there's no way that we can figure out a plan to electrify our fleet, but we can figure out a way to get to the moon. But those types of things. So like being able to have some type of analysis of what is possible on some of these warehouses on the electrification side, that with those types of costs, I think are really good technical pieces that would help, right? Campaigns. But of course, every local campaign is different. So for business partners that are here, I would just say you just need to plug in, right? Just plug into the local fights and find out what is needed. But whatever it is, it's to push forward more benefits for the community.
I'll just add something quick here because it's a separate but related. That as we look toward making a transition to sustainable energy, to non-fossil fuel energy, we need to, just ensuring that it's a just transition. That it doesn't end up that the electric company or that the alternative energy companies get the subsidies that fossil fuel industries got and don't bother treating their workers right, don't bother paying their workers right. So even if the subsidies were to change or if the model were to change, we still need to have things in place that are for workers and that are for communities. Rivian's a good example. So Rivian's this electric truck, it's going to be the first electric truck, and Amazon has ordered 100,000 of the trucks, and Amazon's a huge funder. Well, we know Amazon is really anti-union. We know Tesla's really anti-union. So how is Rivian? Is it going to be different? Right, because right now they're doing an Amazon HQ2 style public bidding war to see who will pay them the most. So what we don't want to see is just a continuation of the same old, but just instead of fossil fuels, it's alternative energy. The transition is about a just equity driven transition. It's not just, so it's a big piece.
Thank you. And with that, we have 20 seconds left. It's appropriate to say that the time for talking is done. Let's get to organizing, folks. So thank you all for being here. I hope you had a great, informative time. And who knows, maybe we'll see each other next year. So take care, everyone. Have a nice one.